that was allowed to be photographed for the kinder, and the photo was allowed to stay in the kinder.
Yes.
But it wasn't to go, like, you couldn't put it on something that to go out to the other parents.
Yes.
So,
yeah. In keeping with the new framework, the children's behaviour and learning is now documented from a strength-based perspective, rather than, meaning that you concentrate on what the children can do rather than a deficit perspective, which means that you're talking about what they can't do. So, for instance, you might have a child that can't cut, which is looking at it in a deficit way. You would say that Johnny is learning to cut, which is if you're trained when I trained. It's sometimes a bit tricky to get your head around, but that's the way to look at it now. And it is quite easy once you change your way of thinking. A good idea may be to have a little pad of sticky notes or a small spiral notebook and just jot down your observations, and of course at the end of the day leave them at the centre. This flows on into evaluation and comments and reflection, which we know now as reflective practice, which is part of the new framework. We're now, as part of the frameworks, required to document our evaluations and reflections on the day-to-day happenings in our centres, and we also encourage the parents and carers to comment on this as well. Some centres use a diary like this, which we actually used last year, which we had at the sign-in book. Do you want to hold that up, Julie? And other centres may use a daily journal. And we've got a couple of versions here, one which we did a couple of years ago and one which Julie has done as well. Do you want to pass these around?
You can do that.
Yeah, there we go. Whatever the centre may have, we do encourage you to reflect on what has happened during the session and to write your comments. And the reflective practice, I'll quote from the national framework. It's a form of ongoing learning. Its intention is to gather information and gain insights that support, inform and enrich decision making about children's learning. Early childhood educators examine what happens in their settings and reflect on what they might change. And from another little quote from the Victorian framework, settings with the best outcomes for children have staff who engage in reflective practice. So it's a really big thing at the moment that we do reflect on what we're doing with the children, with the program, and also with ourselves. Do you have a little bag of tricks? Some of you might. I know Kath has a little bag of tricks, don't you?
I do.
If you haven't, this is perhaps more aimed at teachers. It's not too late to start gathering. You all must have some favourite stories that you enjoy reading and you'd like to share with your children. Other examples could be puppets, figurines for use in imaginative play, small table experiences, games, songs, CDs and so on. And the children are really usually eager to see what's in your bag or your box, and that also is a great way to develop a good rapport with the children. And if you're going to go back to that centre again, they probably get excited about what you're going to bring out of that bag or what story.
They do.
I know Kath's a great story reader. Chris always enjoys your story time.
I've kept some of my very favourite stories from the past, and the kids just absolutely love them. And often if I go back to the same centre, they'll say, "Did you bring the story of the green turtle today?" or whatever, I usually do have it again with others.
Yeah, obviously, when you arrive at the centre, and Julie's touched on this a little bit, there'll be some things that you'll need to do. So we've just headed this at beginning and end of day tasks. So with 15 minutes, there's not a lot of time, but you'll help set up the centre, whether you be the teacher or the assistant for the day. The assistants are required to be at the preschool 15 minutes before, and that's a regulation. And as Julie has touched on, 2 staff members are present at all times. At some centres, families are welcome to unpack belongings, etc. in the foyer and play outside until the session starts, and staff use this time to prepare for the coming session and talk about the children's needs. And at other centres, they open their doors earlier if it's a really hot day or if there's wet weather. And again, at other centres, the door is closed until opening time. So that's really going to vary from centre to centre. At the end of the day, I guess it's really common sense. You help with the general tidy up. If there are activities to set up for the next day, top up the collage, trying, cutting up paper, maybe packing away an activity that's been out for a while, that's lost interest, and talking about what you can set up on that table. There will be some paperwork to attend to, such as writing in the diaries or the journals, and checking the attendance book, or if you have to use the accident book or the medication book or the illness book, just to make sure that's all complete. If, getting back to the attendance book, I've just thought, if a family has not signed out the child, then it's up to a staff member to sign out that child. And also the attendance book, did we talk about that? Needs to be checked in the first hour or so of the session to make sure that everyone has been signed in. Another good thing to do is to note or record any conversations that you may have had with the parents during the session, at the end of the session, or if they've been helping on duty at the beginning of the session, or just note any other visitors or phone calls that may have happened during the session. Where can I find out more? We have in the back of your book a list of websites, and it's by no means complete, but it's a good start. I'll just note a couple of things. There is a new publication called Educator's Guide to the Early Years Learning Framework for Australia. That's now available to support the national framework, and that's at the DEWA website, which is the Commonwealth Department of Education, Employment and Workplace Relations. And also, we didn't note this down, but that's where you can find out more information about the national quality standards. There are training modules for the Victorian framework are now available online, and to download those modules, you can go to the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development website. A lot of these organisations here, they publish little booklets, which I find are really useful. The Early Childhood Australia put out periodicals. They have some great things and they're easy to read. They often review books as well. So if you don't want to tackle a really thick book, these are a good way to learn about things. So they have a little magazine called Every Child, and then they have these other little booklets about, they vary. This one's on building confident learners, which is related to the framework, and this one's called Pathways to Confidence and Wellbeing. They're from the Early Childhood Australia. Then the Lady Gary Centre, which some of you might be familiar with, it's childcare. It used to be preschool, kindergarten, but now it's childcare. That's based in Melbourne, and every capital city has a Lady Gary Centre, and they do a lot of, they arrange a lot of PD and lectures, and students go there to view the rooms. They have viewing booths. They put out a little magazine called Gary Australia, and a little Gary News, which is also a really useful resource. It's 10:30. Yeah. 11:30. Finishing off. Okay. Well, I am nearly finishing off. So it's important to keep up to date with contemporary ideas, and as teachers, we're trialling new ways, as mentioned, and that's part of the reflective practice. And I have just got a little bit to finish off on, which is probably a nice lead into what we're going to do this afternoon. So the most important thing is to have fun, enjoy the children. Mm-hmm. A common thread that you'll find now in our centres is that they're play-based and programs, as this is the way that children learn best. They are process-orientated learning rather than end product, allowing the children to explore, experience and experiment. All centres are now adapting to the two new frameworks, the Victorian framework and the national framework, and they will be implementing reflective practice, and also, which is what you're going to learn more about this afternoon, family-centred practice. And they've found that research is showing that family-centred practice research is showing better outcomes for children if family-centred practice is supported. So learning outcomes are most likely to be achieved when early childhood educators work in partnership with families. So just in closing, Julie and I, when we've been talking about family-centred practice, and this afternoon we'll talk about that, and reflective practice, we're just wanting you to take away something, and we'd like you to reflect on your practices, your strengths and areas that you may need to develop further. So when we talk about reflective practice, it's not just with the children and what's happening in the centre, it's what you think about yourself and what you know and where you want to head.
Okay, with that, thank you. I'd like to formally thank all three ladies for all their help today. And you've done a fantastic job. I hope that you don't feel overwhelmed before things are thinking. I think the main thing was to give you a taste, so that you could go away and have a look. There's things on the table to take as well. I think we'll give you a big